I remember calling up a bank. I said, so I need some guidance on how I can invest money. The kind of answer I got was, you're not rich enough for us. Why miss the chance to serve me right now? Let's provide that guidance and insights to the customer in an extremely easy digital kind of way.
Some of the interesting use cases in open banking, what do you see and where are the trends?
Data is basically the key to unlock financing. We are seeing open banking as a way to get there. We launched an app in the market so that customers can see all their finances in one place.
Yeah, welcome to the Pulse Check podcast. Ankit Suri, CEO and co-founder of Planto. We know each other since many years. It just reminded me of our old office where we met the first time. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Salomon. It's a pleasure, and it's great to see you after a while as well.
Yeah, exactly. And brings me also maybe to the icebreaker, as even though we know each other since a long while, but haven't met just recently. Maybe you can tell us something unique about yourself, maybe also beyond being a startup founder.
Yeah, sure. I guess being a founder comes with a certain trait, like you're kind of curious about everything. There's a lot of people I come across who have found their passion. Like they might be into fitness, they might be into math, things like that. I feel like one of the defining things about me is that I kind of get curious about different things, every other day. One day I'm researching about why a cat gets afraid of a cucumber. Or
that's an interesting one. I don't know either.
Exactly. Or how to use AI to draw coloring books for kids. Or look up why stable coins might be the next big thing. So different topics interest me all the time. So don't ask me what my favorite topic is, but I might throw some random facts at you now and then.
Yeah, that's good. I will watch out for that. And I think curiosity is what the startup founder needs to have, right? Because every day is something new. I mean, running a business, I know it a bit myself. I also compare sometimes to my personal life as a runner in ultra marathons, where also you get thrown into new situations all the time. And that makes it interesting, but also challenging. And as you've now done it for 7+ years, I'm sure you had a number of challenges along the way. But before we go into that, maybe you can put a bit of light on, you came from banking, probably working for one of the big banks here in Hong Kong. And then you decided at some point to open up your own startup. How did that go?
Yeah, so I started my career at HSBC. It was my first job right after my undergrad. And one of the reasons why I joined the bank in the first place was, and this was an insight I had while I was at university, which is, about more than a decade ago, which is everybody has a bank account, but nobody seems to like that experience. As a student, it was not the greatest experience. I didn't know a lot of things about about my credit card, things like that. So I kind of wanted to join banking in the first place to change that. And so I was lucky enough to get through to the grad programs within the bank. And I kind of had a chance to visit different parts of the bank to experience working as well. And after kind of working there for a few years, I realized that with the way sort of financial institutions work is that they're waiting for innovation to be proven into the market before, they can scale that. And so I realized that if I really want to drive innovation fast, I got to be more on the fintech side first. And so I kind of quit, the banking world and sort of moved into a fintech first. So I didn't go off to start a fintech right away. I moved into another fintech, which has got listed recently as well, and I worked there for about a year, and that's where me and my co-founders, we actually kind of came up with this idea to launch this company. So I think I worked for about 4 years, in large bank and a fintech before actually starting my own.
Yeah, it's interesting. And of course, here in the market, the biggest bank, and I'm sure you could really explore with your curiosity every element in banking and using this as to your advantage, then to also discover the gaps that can be, of course, now looked at with your startup. And before we go into all the details and aspects of Planto, I mean, what I missed when I came to Hong Kong 8-9 years ago now is kind of a comparison of the different bank accounts in the first place, and then of course also fully online onboarding journey. I still remember my banker teller when I came to a big bank, I don't name it now, came with an iPad, and I felt, oh, good, all online. No, she took the iPad and took a picture of my passport, and the rest was all manual. Of course, this has evolved. It's much better. There's also been virtual banking a couple of years back.
Yeah, absolutely.
There has been some achievements, but still there is a number of elements that I feel is missing. And comes a bit to the first topic, starting with maybe personal finance, but then also towards personalization, both in a context of B2C, but also B2B.
Yeah.
What your company covers. What have you seen developments in the past 7 years since you started?
Yeah. So actually, coming out of the corporate world and jumping into fintech, I think the whole reason why me and my co-founders we started Planto was around making the banking experience better. The first initial idea when we started Planto back in 2018 was really around the idea of helping millennials who we thought were an underserved segment at that point, and providing them all the kind of financial insights, all the kind of tips and the guidance to help them move towards their financial journey. One of the personal kind of inspiration behind this, behind launching this company, was that I remember calling up a bank when I was still working at HSBC, and I said, look, you know what, I work in a bank. I think I make a little bit of money, so I need some guidance on how I can invest that money. And the kind of answer I got was, you're not rich enough for us. And so I think what that kind of told me was that, and what that made me question was, I might not be wealthy enough today, but then I think I'm on my way to have a decent career ahead of me, and I might be a valuable customer to you today. So why do you want to miss the chance to serve me right now?
For sure. Right? As a Planto co-founder, once it's a multi-billion-dollar company, they might come back to you.
Well, hopefully. But this is back in 2014, 2015, when I'm still sort of working at the bank. And so I was just thinking, I mean, the fact that, I'm not able to get that guidance from a financial institution around helping me manage my finances, it means a lot of my friends are probably not getting it as well. And so that's where, me and my co-founders, we kind of came along with this idea that let's provide that guidance and sort of, insights to the customer, to people in an extremely easy, digital kind of way. And so that's where we actually launched an app in the market, which basically help consumers kind of link all their bank accounts, all their credit cards, investment accounts. In Hong Kong, we have the MPF accounts, which is kind of like the retirement portfolio accounts, so that customers can see all their finances in one place and, can get sort of a lot of personalized insights on how they are doing, where am I spending my money, how much am I saving, do I have a lot of money to invest in, do I need to save more in order to, have my emergency funds before I can start investing, am I saving too much, or, is my portfolio diverse enough, am I taking too much risk? So all these basic financial questions that we all ask ourselves, in kind of like educating ourselves through personal finance is what we attacked through the product that we launched. And what we saw through that is our hypothesis was correct, because the product got a lot of traction. In a couple of years, we were over 300,000 registered users on the app in a place like Hong Kong, which is about sort of 5.5 million digitally active customers, right? So and this is not with not with a lot of marketing spend and funding. So, pretty much with a little bit of marketing and mostly organic, we were able to get that word of mouth out there and get people, using the app. And more importantly, having the trust to link their bank account data with us so that, they can actually get the value. And so I think our hypothesis was correct that there is a segment in this market, who has an unmet need around personal finance. And we kind of figured out that we can actually use their data to help them, get that in an extremely seamless way.
Yeah, and the experience you had is an experience that I think everyone has to some point, and you may not be the ultimate ultra high net worth individual, ultra rich, but also not as poor as the bank may call you. So mass affluent, actually a very interesting segment, a very large segment that is quite often underserved. And you mentioned also the aggregation of not only cash accounts, but even including investment accounts, MPF. For example, you may not know, and even me personally, I struggle with this, that you have your MPF where you may not rebalance your portfolio that often. You can allocate the different funds according to your needs. And I also didn't look as often on it, but then realized, looking at my own brokerage account, that I'm quite exposed to the US market. Of course, in the past 2-3 years, this was interesting. But of course, is also a certain risk. And if you have it in an aggregated view, of course, you see, hey, you have actually allocation in, for example, Apple shares extensively because you have VOO in your brokerage account and also America's funds in your MPF account. So that re-aggregation is something I only saw with your app first and also used it personally. And I still miss from bigger banks, as almost everyone, let's be honest, banks with at least one or even 2, 3 of the big 3 banks here, meaning HSBC, Standard Chartered, Bank of China, Hang Seng being under HSBC. So these are the main ones, but they typically have credit cards also with others and so on. And they want to have this aggregated, right? And then coming back to the personalization, I mean, first of all, if a bank, and even a bank I actually already bank with, calls me and apologies, I live in Hong Kong since a while. I speak a little bit of Mandarin Putonghua, but I don't speak Cantonese fluently yet. They always speak in not my native language. I'm okay if they don't speak in German, but maybe English. I mean, that's the basics of, okay, you call someone up, you know the language he speaks, what he might be interested in. But it's just scripted, same thing. Yeah. Maybe don't even speak your language, sell you something you don't need.
Yeah.
These call centers, I thought that it's back from the 80s, 90s, but still do exist.
Yeah.
And before we go into further account aggregation and so on, I mean, that basic of hyper-personalization is the minimum we should see, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I can't forget when a friend called me up and, she wanted to tell me about this instance where she had just got this, she just sold her house and she had this huge deposit in her bank. And she called me to ask me, hey, do you have any advice on what I should do, like how I should think about investing this money or kind of, putting it into time deposits and stuff. And then I was just like, okay, let me think about it. And the next day she calls me and she says, actually, the bank just called me. And I thought the bank called me because they saw this huge deposit and they wanted me to, invest that. But instead they asked me if I wanted a loan.
Yeah.
So, it's absolutely right. Like, I think the problem, or I think what we've seen is that when it comes to personalization in general, there's a lot of talks about, how banking needs to look like Facebook or Netflix or things like that. I think the comparable isn't exactly correct because when we think about hyper-personalization in financial services, it's not about the attention spans of the customer.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really about that dynamic one-to-one engagement. I think that's the key learning that financial services needs to take. And that's what we saw in Planto as well. The fact that we could just tell you that you've just received your salary, what would you like to do with your salary? Just that simple prompt of asking you, hey, you've just received your bonus for the year. What do you want to do with it? Can we help you invest? That itself has such a great, NPS factor or such a great aha moment for the customer that it kind of, keeps them loyal to you. It kind of creates that sense of almost like, that one-to-one sort of special feeling as a customer. And I think that's the kind of takeaway that financial services needs to take from these big tech platforms, instead of looking at hyper-personalization as let's get customers spending a lot of time on the banking app. I mean, why do you want to do that?
Exactly. And interesting enough, I mean, for example, credit card data. I'm from Switzerland, Zurich. I often travel there multiple times during the year. Quite often then, of course, do car rental, always through the same platform, always in Swiss francs, always same location. And suddenly my card was once blocked, even though I've done that transaction probably 10 times the past 7-8 years. And then, there was a suspicious transaction in Switzerland, the place I visit the most next to being in Hong Kong, right? If they would have leveraged the data, they would immediately have seen, okay, maybe okay to do a callback, but not just immediately block my card. And even just the unblock is not that available in every banking app, which is one of the most basic functions you should have. So definitely not yet there. Going a step further, I mean, hyper-personalization we will come back to for sure, but also the open banking aspect, because account aggregation as well as orchestration includes also that the banks open up towards other banks that you basically have the ability to connect. Maybe you can give a quick thought on that, as you're also part of the Fintech community here in the Association of Hong Kong, and also AI, which we'll touch on later, Association of Hong Kong. What is the current big trend when it comes to open banking? Also maybe explain quickly what open banking means for everyone and where it hopefully leads to in Hong Kong.
Yeah, no, so open banking has a lot of definitions, to be honest. There's a lot of words around this. Open banking, open finance, embedded banking. A lot of people confuse it as well. So I think in the scope of the discussion today, open banking is really about giving consumers the ability to share their data to another banking app through sort of a digital, simple, secure, consent-based sort of journey, right? So instead of me submitting my statements to you when I'm applying for a loan, I simply inform you that, hey, my salary is in my bank B. Why don't you just retrieve my salary from bank B and verify it, right? Instead of me submitting my statement to you through a scanned copy, right? So that, in a sense, is what is open banking, in our sort of discussion today, is the ability to share data within two financial institutions, right?
With consent, as you mentioned before. So people don't need to be scared, hey, that suddenly everyone accesses your data. You consent first and decide if you want to share.
Exactly. So in Hong Kong, what's happening is that last year, we're in 2025 now. So late 2023, the regulator launched an initiative called IADS, which is interbank account data sharing, which basically enables the licensed financial institutions, so about 28 financial institutions, to exchange data with each other through, in a way where, when a bank A reaches out to bank B, they are able to get the APIs of the bank B to be able to connect to them. So this IDS initiative was launched in late 2023, and in 2024, what we saw was banks actually, starting to launch use cases around this. In fact, I think Q4 in 2024, we also saw the regulator hold a demo day as well, where all of the financial institutions who participated within this initiative actually showcased what kind of innovation they have done. And what we saw was use cases being built both from the retail banking perspective as well as the business banking perspective. Because in Hong Kong, what's happened is that the open banking data, or this IDS initiative, is actually covering both retail banking data as well as business banking data. Currently, it's only restricted to our current account and saving accounts. So meaning the balances that you see in your saving account, it can be shared, or the transactions within that can be shared, both for your retail as well as for your business account. So that's where all of the use cases that we've been seeing until now.
Yeah, and you bring just an interesting point as you're also a startup entrepreneur. I'm also a business owner, and in Instagram, for example, you can just switch between your business account and personal account. Sometimes I would love to have a bit of a easier switch from my business banking, private, also being able, okay, now I just released the salary payments to all my staff, which also means I get my salary or pay out my own salary and I can switch and all of that. Of course, not as easy as in social media and other basics, as we discussed before. Seeing of course, everyone has multiple accounts, or maybe even accounts from overseas, being able to connect that. I'm happy to see that finally some of the bigger banks are able to now link some accounts, even though not all, from even their competitors. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, on that note, I mean, as a business owner, I think one of the interesting trends that we have seen is the rise of this kind of second income or a gig economy kind of thing. Because we also see, through the data of open banking as well, that, customers are spending on advertisements on Facebook through their personal accounts. So I feel like there is this line that is thinning as well between what is considered a business. If I'm providing a service, and using my personal account for that, can I be eligible for a business account in the future just because I'm now spending on Facebook to advertise my services, or I'm using business applications like email newsletters in order to send my newsletters out. So I think having the ability to share data is now giving financial institutions the ability to also recognize who are the future entrepreneurs as well. And now suddenly you are in a position where you're able to identify who could be the next, businesses who are up and coming and get them banked in early, right, before they go to your competitors.
Yeah, and it's interesting that even if you already chose to also business bank with the same bank you already have your retail account with, they still need to onboard you completely new and fresh again. They're not even able to share between the different divisions of a bank. And that's not only a legal aspect, as I could give consent, of course, to share data, but also a technical constraint some of them still have when it comes to legacy platforms. But before going there, some of the interesting use cases in open banking, what do you see and where are the trends?
Yeah, so as I said, I think in Hong Kong, we are seeing use cases both on the retail and the SME banking side as well. I'll talk about retail first. We've discussed personalization at length until now. So, that's obviously one of the first use cases that we have seen, which is just giving users that one view. I mean, in Hong Kong, people do have multiple bank accounts. There's no doubt about it. I think, we saw that in Planto app as well. And I think recently, large banks have conducted some market research as well, which has resulted in similar findings. So, people have multiple bank accounts. People want to get a single view of it. So account aggregation is definitely a use case that has come out. As an extension to that, we are finding banks go beyond that to provide customers insights around these, using the data that they are seeing in open banking. We worked with Citibank as well, and through one of our implementations where, we partnered with them to launch personalized financial insights, informing their customers proactively and predictively to help them, basically inform them about their finances and even provide some kind of personalized recommendations as well in order to improve the way they were managing their finances. We also partnered with another company called Economy to provide customers carbon insights. So, how do you use the electricity spends that we detect through your transaction data to actually identify what could be your carbon footprint in the market? So helping customers who want to be, who want to live a greener lifestyle, giving them a chance to understand, where they are against the average person in Hong Kong. So giving that kind of, insights to the customers is something that we have seen as a use case in the market, and that's been interesting. Customers have shown willingness in terms of wanting to link their bank accounts to get this insights. It's only been a few months since banks have gone live with this, but we have seen some reasonable numbers in terms of uptake for these services. So I think there's an opportunity to grow that. Obviously, one challenge here is that in Hong Kong, open banking, banks are still connecting with each other one by one. So you will find that if you're listening out here in Hong Kong, and if you use banks, some of your banks who have actually launched these features, you might see one bank, two bank, three banks that you can connect to. That's because they're connecting to each bank one by one. So it will take a little bit of time to get connected to all the 28 banks, but I'm sure there'll be some innovation in this space this year in order to encourage that. So that's more on the account aggregation and the insight side. The other aspect is lending. Lending, when it comes to retail side, we never think about Hong Kong as kind of an underserved market for lending. But interestingly, recently we found that in Hong Kong, the proxy kind of average approval rate for loans, personal loans, is only about 20%.
Oh, wow.
So, you'd often hear that, Southeast Asian markets or, South Asian markets are the ones where, people can't get access to credit. But the reality is that even in Hong Kong, getting access to unsecured financing through banks can be difficult. And so there is actually a pretty big ecosystem of lenders in the market, non-bank lenders who actually are there to serve these needs. But this is an opportunity for financial institutions to now, use external data like open banking or any other data, alternative data, to actually improve their credit assessment. So we are seeing some uptake in this in the form of pilots where banks are looking at using open banking as a way to improve the underwriting for this segment. So that's something which are currently undergoing. And on the SME side, this is something that's been in the news a lot.
Yes.
Hong Kong, it's something that the government has spoken about openly. I think regulator has even set up a task force around this topic as well. I think there's even guarantee schemes, financing guarantee schemes as well. So again, I think in the space of SME financing, where it's said that data is basically the key to unlock financing, we are seeing open banking as a way to get there. So we have actually implemented use cases as well with financial institutions where we have leveraged open banking to determine insights around businesses and their cash flow, and using that in order to improve the underwriting process and enabling credit. And so that has seen some positive results as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Hong Kong being such a business-friendly hub, where then banks are struggling with microfinancing. And you said it before, the startup world is also changing with people just making money with their social network, Instagram, Facebook, as you said, to make a bit of additional money, and may need some microfinancing also for new ideas of what they would want to explore too. But even in, again, consumer loan, where I had a bad experience with one of the virtual banks where I applied for a Tesla loan because it was advertised everywhere, bought my Tesla and was then expecting, okay, I mean, I can afford it myself. I don't necessarily need the loan, but it's actually an interesting, almost 0% loan offer. And then in the end got declined because of also some paperwork, which was really ridiculous. So definitely a lot of work still to be done. Brings me to a new aspect of how to monetize also open banking. Of course, every bank, especially the bigger ones, they first see it more to defend themselves against the competition to the market, are a bit cautious on how much to open up, and then also how to monetize, of course, IT project to open up your APIs also costs a bit of money, and you need to explain it in the business case. What do you see when it comes to also being able to monetize, and what trends do you see there?
I think an interesting part about the launches that we have seen when it comes to open banking is that actually larger banks have launched use cases around this. So it's not just the smaller banks, which is a little counterintuitive because you would expect, the smaller banks to be looking at open banking as more of a opportunity to get more data about customers and using that data to their advantage. But I think the fact that larger banks have also acted towards launching use cases has shown that they see the value of this data, and they want to ensure that they are the first ones to hold on to that customer's consent of sharing this data with other banks. Because I think there is a general realization that a customer isn't going to go around sharing their data with everyone. And so if you're going to be the first in the market to launch a use case, it's going to be substantially difficult for the second person, second bank launching the same use case and convincing the same customer to actually share their data. So, the interesting thing that we have seen is that there's a huge realization that data is a huge competitive advantage, and the monetization of open banking is all about who can hold on to that data for the most number of customers. And so it's great to see larger banks playing a role into actually launching use cases. The next phase of this is obviously into monetizing this data, but I think this is something of a journey that banks have been undertaking with all of the infrastructure upgrades that they have been going through. So I think it's part of that. But it's great to see the banking ecosystem as a whole looking at using open banking.
Yeah, maybe my last question. I see that we're almost on time already. Of course, everyone talking about AI, Gen AI. How do you see the future trends now? And you're part of the AI association also here in Hong Kong. What will these AI trends do when it comes to real-time personalization and so on? Any things you see coming in the coming years?
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting space. The great thing about AI right now is that everyone's talking about it, so it's on top of mind. And I think we are seeing, senior executives, both from business side as well as, on the tech side, using, looking at how AI can not just impact the cost base, but also enable the next business models of the future, And so I think there's focus on both cost as well as revenue opportunities of AI. One of the key areas where we are focused on when it comes to, AI is in the space of basically hyper-personalization. The reason is because Gen AI, we believe, is very good at summarizing content and creating content. And one of the big problems we see with financial institutions right now is there's a huge process right now when it comes to actually launching campaigns to the customers. It goes through a huge approval process. It's very difficult to be very dynamic with customer because of the approvals it takes. So the content or the campaign generation cycle is just too long. And so that's where we see AI come in and basically, generate content in alliance with the branding guidelines, the compliance guidelines, and of the financial institution, and using that to basically deliver very personalized marketing campaigns or engagement campaigns to the customers. So I think that's somewhere where we as a company are looking at closely. I think AI Association is a fantastic a stage, and it's great that Hong Kong is looking at it, is trying to become the next global hub for AI. It's got a lot of potential in terms of the industries that are here and the amount of data that is set here. So I think the most amazing thing that I've seen within the association is that it represents across, I think, 12 different sectors. So it goes beyond financial services, it goes beyond, insurance. It actually reaches out to sectors like retail, big tech. So tourism, travel. So I think what that has shown me is that AI is very industry agnostic, and each industry is looking to understand how is the other industry leveraging AI and looking to learn from each other. And that's been the greatest part of being in this association. And I look forward to learning more in terms of what we can learn from that and bring it to financial services.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Hong Kong is again somewhere in between also, but call it the West, US, and also China is doing with just recently in the news OpenAI versus DeepSeek and other LLMs. And so actually we are in the middle of almost a war of what are the best, most effective models being applied. And definitely when it comes to banking, financial services, all the banks are looking into it, leveraging it already to some extent, but there's still so much more to come.
Absolutely.
We'd love to talk more, but maybe in the next round. So maybe last quick question is, where can we find you, Ankit, and also Planto, your company?
It's been a pleasure, Solomon. Thank you so much. You can find us at www.planto.io, or you can email us at hello@planto.hk. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Ankit Suri 1. If you type that on LinkedIn, you'll find me, or you can email me at ankit@planto.io.
Yeah, and just follow Fintech Association and so on. Your name is everywhere. And definitely when you live in Hong Kong, I'm sure people have seen you. It was a pleasure as usual, Ankit. So thank you so much again. The Pulse Check with also being available on social media, of course, YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcast. So please follow us, like and subscribe. Pulse Check. Thank you, Ankit. See you next time.
Thank you.